Today I need to try and tackle a job that I've been meaning to do for ages. I need to get some fresh blades on my planer thicknesser. This is the Elektra Beckum HC260. As I understand it, it's pretty much identical to the Metabo HC260 and also the Record Power PT260. The blades that I've got in here are the really thin, cheap ones that are only about £20 for a pair. They're really dull now and they're not cutting so well. I've got one of these old sharpening block things with a square profile on one side and a diamond on the other. I got this with the machine when I bought it. I bought the machine second hand, and I do use this on occasion, but I just haven't found it to be very effective. Now that might be because the abrasive on this has worn down over time. I don't know, but this isn't going to cut it. I've got a 10mm spanner, which I can use to loosen these bolts. And once these are loose, the blade should come out. So I didn't realise, or I forgot, that these blades are actually the reversible ones. You can see there's a cutting edge on both sides, and I've only actually used one of these sides. So flipping it over would be an easy option, but I'm not going to do that today because there's something else I've been meaning to try. In this box are the original blades that came with the machine, but these ones are nice and thick and chunky, so I've got a feeling that they might be better quality, and I'm going to have a go at sharpening them. Another reason I prefer the original knives is that you'll see that they have these grooves on the back, and on the clamping sleeves that the knives sit on, you'll see there's a little adjustment wheel, and that can be adjusted with an Allen key from the top that fits inside the slot on the knives, allowing it to be adjusted really precisely to set the height of the knife. And as you'll see later, that's really useful. The old thin knives do not have this, and that makes them really fiddly and difficult to set because you're trying to make these minute adjustments to the height of the blade, and then you tighten them down and they move slightly. Honestly, it's a nightmare, and last time it took me about half a day just to get them set right. It's one of those jobs where you need about 3 pairs of hands. After looking around online, you can still buy the thicker knives with slots on the back, but they're about twice the price of the thin ones. So as you can see, these are pretty dull at the moment. I've got this old grinder belt sander machine, and I've got a video about this if you want more detail about the stone that I fitted to the grinder and the tool rest as well, so I'll link to that in the description box. I'll leave links to all the equipment that I'm using too. First I'm going to true up the surface of the stone using one of these diamond abrasive grinding wheel dresser things to get it flat and square to my tool rest just by eye, and this makes a real mess and you definitely want to be wearing a respirator. First I'm going to polish up the back of the knives using the belt sander, and this has a 400 grit belt fitted, so it leaves a really fine polished surface. So I just want to make sure it's nice and clean right up to the tip of the cutting edge. I can then set the tool rest to the right angle to grind the bevel of the knife, and I want to get the tool rest as close to the wheel as possible without it catching. That looks pretty good. I made some marks with a marker pen just so that I can see where I'm grinding material and get started with the grinding. It looks like I've got the angle spot on here, which is good, but I can see that I've not yet removed anything at the very tip of the cutting edge, so I do more of the same. I'm trying to grind as consistently as possible along the entire length of the knife with even pressure, which is a little bit tricky, but with some practice I'm confident I can get decent results. I'm looking for a nice consistent burr along the cutting edge from one end to the other. At this point I can feel with my fingers that the knives are now really sharp, and they're slicing through paper pretty well too. I set up a work light and a flat surface so that I can check how flat my cutting edge is after grinding. The light is going to show me whether I did a good job or not. And as you can see, there's a bit of light here in the middle, just a fraction of a millimetre, but no light on both ends, so it seems I did too much grinding in the centre and not enough at the ends. To be honest, for my purposes this is plenty accurate enough, but for the sake of the video I thought I'd put in a little bit more effort. I know there are people out there who obsess about perfection, but I'm not one of them. And in woodworking I really don't think those high tolerances are necessary. To take this a step further, I thought I'd try polishing the bevel with my leather strop a bit, so I'm adding some fresh cutting compound and using it just to polish up the bevel. but I'm not convinced that it made much of a difference. It cut paper about the same as it did before, and I think that's because I'm going from an 80 grit stone right up to whatever high grit this polishing compound is, and nothing in between. So in future, I'm not going to bother doing this. I would have preferred to have bought a higher grit wheel. 120 or 180 would have been better, but back when I got this, it was the highest grit I could find of this particular type and size of stone. A CBN wheel would be an even better choice, but for the minimal amount of grinding that I do, a stone wheel works fine for me. So now in with the clamping sleeve and then the freshly sharpened knife, and this is the tricky bit as you need to get the slot in the knife into the wheel on the clamping bar in a tight space. Unfortunately, you can't put them together outside the machine and then push them in there together. There just isn't enough space for that, but if you wiggle it around you can feel when it's in. That's what she said. Now I'm going to turn the bolts just so that they're ever so slightly snug but not tight. I'm going to fit the infeed table next, as I'll need that to reference from to set the height of each knife. I add some masking tape and then using a straight piece of plywood I draw a line at the end. As I rotate the cutter block you'll see it catches and moves the plywood, and I want it to move by about 5 or 6 millimeters, and it's moved by more than that here, it's moved by about 8. So here's where I can use the Allen key just to drop the blade ever so slightly. It needs just a very minute adjustment and then I repeat the test again. It took a few attempts, but eventually I got it where it needs to be, and I can lock the bolt on that side down tight. Then I repeat the same process on the other side, again tiny adjustments, until I can get the plywood to move by about 5 or 6 millimeters. It's important that it moves by the same distance on each side. And when I'm happy I can tighten that bolt down, and then the other 2 bolts in the middle as well. When everything is tightened, I do the same tests again just to make sure that nothing has shifted, and I do it in the middle of the table too, and I'm happy with this now. Same process again for setting the second knife, and then I can test it out. So I grabbed a piece of beech and scribbled all over it with a pencil and gave it a pass through, and it cut really well even with a heavy pass. Then a light pass through the thicknesser, and I deliberately picked a piece of wood with a knot in, as these areas are prone to tearing out the grain, but it was perfectly clean, so I was well pleased with the results here, and I'll definitely be doing this again in future. I saved about 40 quid and it took me less than an hour. Please subscribe for more videos. If you'd like to help support the channel, you can find links below to my Patreon and YouTube channel membership, where you can get early access to my videos, exclusive content, free project plans and cut lists, and a name credit at the end of my videos. Thanks for watching.